Hi everyone, this is your attorney, Jiwon Lee. Ever since the COVID-19 pandemic took the world by storm last year, hate crimes and discrimination towards Asians have been increasing, and it reached its worst stage on March 16, 2021, when a series of mass shootings occurred in Atlanta, Georgia. The shooter was a man by the name of Robert Aaron Long, and he was charged after killing 8 people at 3 different spas and massage businesses, and 6 of the victims were Asian women. He told the police that the attacks were not racially motivated and it was related to his sex addiction. The public is currently outraged and arguing that this is a hate crime mainly because the shooter specifically targeted and went to the Asian-owned businesses, where the majority of the people inside were women of Asian descent. Authorities said that right now there isn't enough evidence to support federal hate crime charges and stated the investigation is still going on. If the shooter is found guilty of a hate crime later, it would be a landmark case for Georgia. Until the beginning of last year, Georgia was one of 4 states in the US without a hate crime law. But soon after, in June of 2020, Georgia finally enacted one, which now allows judges to increase the punishment if it's determined as a hate crime. This law imposes additional criminal sentencing guidelines on anyone who commits a hate crime intentionally based on race, sex, sexual orientation, color, religion, national origin, mental disability, or physical disability. Also in Georgia, the minimum sentence for murder is life in prison, with or without the possibility of parole after 30 years. The Atlanta shooting stimulated the already growing movement #StopAsianHate, and the Asian community has been voicing out about the issue louder than ever. This whole incident has been the biggest issue hovering around the world, and of course it was a big news in Korea as well, especially because the majority of the victims were Korean Americans. Since there is so much news about racial discrimination and hate crimes in US, at times it almost looks like it has only been an issue in this country. However, we shouldn't forget that discrimination has always been a global issue, and Korea is no exception. In March last year, the National Human Rights Commission of Korea did a survey targeting 300 immigrants in Korea, and it revealed that 68% of them think racism exists in Korea. There is racial discrimination in the Korean labor system by restricting most immigrant workers to simple labor. Racial discrimination happens in daily life based on social and cultural differences. This connects to the same big problem where the majority of the public still believe that Korea and racism are not interrelated, which does not reflect reality. At this point, I'm sure you might wonder, what are the laws that protect against racism or any discrimination in Korea? Unfortunately, there is no anti-discrimination law yet. In other words, the Korean criminal law system does not have a law that particularly regulates acts of hate. So if anyone gets arrested for hate crimes, the police charge the attacker according to the criminal act, mainly as violence, defamation, or insult instead. The very first Korean who got penalized for saying racist comments was Mr. Park back in 2009. This incident happened on the bus, and Park shouted at a man named Hussein, who is an Indian professor from Seongong-hwa University, calling him dirty and smelly. He even yelled at the professor's Korean friend, which eventually made the professor file a complaint against Park to the police. Since there is no law that protects foreigners against racism, the police charged Park with insult, and he had to pay a 1 million Korean won fine, which is around $880. One of the strategies for reducing racial discrimination claimed by the National Human Rights Commission of Korea is that the country needs to make a fundamental policy to define racism and the types of the crimes related to it. In addition to this, a lot of people think the best way to be able to stop the racism is to legislate an anti-discrimination law. One interesting fact is an Anti-Discrimination Act has already been discussed since 2003, and from 2007, many social organizations constantly tried to get legislation for it to be passed, but there hasn't been any progress until now, mainly due to the conflicting views in Korean society about sexual minorities. Since it's still quite a debatable issue in Korea, there is no doubt that the legislation of such hate crime law will take some more time. We are definitely in this together against the virus, and we should not be misled to go against each other in any circumstance. And even when the pandemic ends, this ongoing issue must be solved. So if you faced any racial discrimination in Korea and need help, please fill out the form down below and I will be available to help you. Again, this is your attorney, Jiwon Lee. Thanks for watching.